Rules Committee come to order, and thank you very much for joining us today at the Rules Committee. Another day of great activity, moving forward with an agenda to let the American people know that we're not only alive and well, but making an effort to appropriately move forward funding to avoid the decisions that have to be made at the last end. We can get them done up front, give the Senate enough time to see our work. The American people will review that also. Today, the committee will consider H.R. 3180, the Intelligence Authorization Act fiscal year 2018, as well as House Amendment S-144, the VA Choice and Quality Employment Act of 2017. H.R. 3180 provides the intelligence community the authorization needed to protect and defend the United States of America. It supports critical national security programs such as those protecting Americans against terrorism, cyber attacks, and hostile foreign nations. The total funding authority by the bill is consistent with the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2015, balancing fiscal discipline and national security. The committee will also consider VA Choice and Quality Employment Act of 2017. The House Amendment S-144 authorizes and appropriates $2.1 billion for the Veterans Choice Fund and authorizes major medical facility leases. This legislation also enhances the recruitment, retention, and training of important VA workforce that is necessary to ensure that the men and women who have supported this nation for years and given their best lives in service are properly treated and taken care of. I'd like to welcome the gentleman, the young chairman from California of the Intelligence Committee, Chairman Nunes, and Ranking Member Schiff, who is expected to be here to the Rules Committee. Without objection, anything you have in writing will be in the record, and I look forward to your testimony. Before we get there, Mr. Chairman, we're going to defer to the ranking member for any opening statement the gentleman from Worcester, Massachusetts may have. Gentleman's recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to recognize a special guest who's with me today, a British member of Parliament, Gerald Jones, who's visiting us, who's shadowing me today, and we're happy to welcome here. And because I told him we get along so well, I'm going to I will forego an opening statement.
Okay.
All right?
That's fair. Mr. Jones, we're delighted that you're with us. In fact, many of the members of Congress, perhaps most importantly, Judge Hastings, has visited your beautiful country and been in Parliament. I have had a chance to visit, and I will tell you that your system is as interesting as ours. And it is not unusual when each of us up here get out, whether it be late at night or early in the morning as it might be, that we enjoy turning on the TV and seeing your hour that you spend with debate that happens in the House of Commons, and it's important to watch this. And so I want to thank you for being a part of what we do also.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I'll be very brief. I want to join in welcoming the Member of Parliament. I had the good fortune of serving as President of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. And if you can say that, you ought to be the president of that organization. But in any event, Bruce George was my predecessor. And so he and I worked very actively on a number of actions during that period of time. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for
Yes, sir. Well, we're delighted that you're here, and it's my belief that at least one other member would be joining us, a member from Parliament who may be with one of our members here today. Okay. Adam, we're delighted that you're here. We have already formally introduced you. We're now going to move to the chairman for his opening remarks, and we would also expect the same from you, and the gentleman, the young chairman, is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would also like to welcome our British friends here today. And this bill actually is important to our British allies because, as most people know, they're probably one of our strongest allies around the world and partners, and the intelligence agencies work closely with them. So I'll just be very brief and say that this bipartisan legislation provides the intelligence community authorization needed to protect and defend the United States against terrorism, cyber attacks, and hostile foreign nations. The total funding authorized by the bill is consistent with the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2015, balancing fiscal discipline and national security. H.R. 3180 enables the intelligence community to carry out its vital work protecting Americans in the most complex threat environment since 9/11. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Schiff, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for the opportunity to testify today. And thank you, Ranking Member. Very pleased to be here to testify about H.R. 3180, the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2018. This is a solid bipartisan bill which won approval by unanimous voice vote in committee. As I said on the floor earlier this week, I believe the IAA will become law, and I look forward to its passage in the House. I also believe we should afford members the chance to offer amendments and make an already good bill even better. From time to time, we have allowed the bill to come up on suspense by mutual consent. Other times, we've had it come up on regular order. And this year, because of the intense interest in the intelligence agencies, we wanted to afford our members the opportunity to offer amendments. So I would urge that this be not a closed rule, but either an open rule, a rule that at least permits members who are not on the committee to offer amendments. In committee, all of us had an opportunity to have our input, and the majority was more than considerate in incorporating amendments we had to offer. But there's intense interest outside the committee in also having that opportunity. The intelligence community oversees some of the most sensitive and highly classified aspects of our operations, and this bill is the primary vehicle that we use to guarantee the appropriate balance between national security and civil liberties and privacy. It continues a recent run of very bipartisan intelligence authorizations. Like its predecessors, the bill funds, equips, and gives policy direction to the IC, as well as the military intelligence elements of the Department of Defense. Funding is slightly below the President's budget request, but sustains intelligence priorities of prior authorizations. It also underscores the continued threat that we face from Russia and has a good prescription for doing our best to meet that threat. So again, I think it's a very good bill, but one that we would like our members to have an opportunity to offer amendments and be heard. And with that, I'm happy to yield back.
Thank you very much. Look, I have received a brief on this. I do understand that this is very sensitive information. I also overrode the overriding principles that I received was that your markup, your meetings, your opportunities to meet with each other are robust, and that the committee sees what they do in much the same lens. I do not anticipate, in being fair to the body, that I think opening up the entire matter would be good to us. So I will look at it very carefully, and the committee would, about any amendments or processes that would open up literally the entire intelligence viewpoint for people. Mr. Chairman, your leadership of the committee, to me, has provided an amazing viewpoint of the threats that have been placed against the country. I want to thank you for your continued leadership as you have encouraged during the last few years open dialogue with the administration, senior administration officials who have taken the time to come to the general body of our members, to provide them regular briefings, to stand behind the sharing of information with the knowledge that the membership needed to perhaps understand some of the complexities of our business. I think you and I have spoken a number of times about the need to make sure that the overall intellectual content of our new members, their expectations of what they needed to know and perform in their duties. And I want to provide you feedback saying thank you. Thank you for your extreme leadership to not only be more open with comment, but also when anyone came to you for you to accomplish those things that would be necessary of receiving the data, information, and answers that might need to be available to those members. And I personally want to thank you for your leadership that I think has been exemplary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that, and I hope you know that that commitment remains active today. We've had 2 briefings for our new members on 702 reauthorization, which is an important program that expires at the end of this year. And I appreciate your comments because we want members to be active that are not only members on the committee but also off the committee. We always try to make ourselves and our staff available to answer all the members' questions from the entire body, whether they be Republicans or Democrats.
Well, that's what I am actually suggesting is truthful, that I believe the members of the body have gained a sense of ability to prepare themselves. I think you looking over the horizon for activities and things which we have to tackle in the future is always important. And I'm proud of your leadership. Not one time have I come to you or heard of anybody who said, you know, they were a closed box. They would not appropriately, they couldn't find the way to answer my question. That's not happening. And I'm pleased with that and very proud of that. Mr. Woodall?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any questions. I think it says something about the combined leadership here that we tried to move this on suspension the first time around. Folks have come to put a great deal of trust in the committee's work product, but I'm always happy to put the thumb of the Rules Committee on the scale, Mr. Chairman, so I'm glad they're back here today. I yield back.
Yes, sir. The gentleman from Worcester.
Well, this is pretty disappointing, to be honest with you. I don't really have any problem with either of you. I mean, you've done your work in committee, and the members of the committee have done their work, but, and this is an important matter, and while it's nice to ask you questions to get answers, you know, we're a legislative body, and I'm looking at some of the amendments that were submitted by Democrats and Republicans. They don't seem to be unreasonable subjects to debate. The chairman talks about opening up the entire intelligence authorization bill like we're going to, you know, open up all the nation's secrets. That's not what we're talking about here.
Which, sir, it would be on an open rule.
What?
It would be if you open it up where anybody can
Well, I
come
mean,
and add
well, I mean,
anything
well, so
on the
what? I mean,
rule.
we'd love.
Well, I do care.
Yeah, I'd love an open rule. I mean, I like a little. I believe in practicing democracy, you know, in a democratic institution like this. But even if you don't want to open it up, in the past we've had structured rules. You know, I mean, and you know, we have amendments that have been submitted, Democrats and Republicans. None of these seem unreasonable. They all seem germane. I mean, you don't like them, you could vote against them. But I mean, the idea that we would, again, come up here and continue the pattern of shutting down debate is really disturbing. I mean,
Gentleman, yield.
Yeah, I'm happy to yield.
My reference was to an open rule. My reference was not in preference to a structure. And the gentleman knows we have made hundreds of amendments in order over the last 2 weeks.
Well,
The gentleman is aware of that.
We're dealing with the intelligence authorization, am I right? Are you here to testify on the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2018? Is that the bill we're talking about? And the gentleman, Mr. Schiff, just asked that amendments be made in order. We prefer an open rule, but you're not going to give us an open rule. Let's have a structured rule. I don't understand why that's such a big deal. And one of the reasons why this went down on suspension was because members had some good ideas that they wanted to discuss on the floor. None of it compromises our intelligence secrets or anything like that. I mean, we ought to have that right. And again, we are on, I mean, last year was the most closed Congress in history, and we are on track this year to become even more closed. And I don't, that's not something that I think any of us should aspire to. So I don't get it, why we can't take some time and consider some of these rules. But we're not in charge, you are, and we have, let me ask the Chairman Nunez, I mean, do you support a structured rule? I mean, you know the amendments that have been offered, I mean.
No, I actually sent a letter, I believe, I can submit it for the record. I thought maybe it went to you also or to the ranking member, but I guess it didn't. But I requested a closed rule.
And so you don't believe that any of these members, Democrats or Republicans, should have the opportunity to be able to offer their ideas?
Yeah, you know, look, I think we have a very transparent committee, and we reach out to Republicans and Democrats to come down and get briefings and to give us their input. When you're dealing with 17 intelligence agencies, it's very, very sensitive. And typically, we've passed this bill overwhelmingly. You know, normally 90% of the body or so, 85% of the body votes for this bill year in and year out. And I think it's just much safer not to have a bill that deals with very sensitive topics to be amended on the House floor if we can avoid it.
But with respect, I mean, I'm looking at some of these amendments. Some of them are just calling for reports. I mean, I don't, some of them are probably a little bit more detailed than others, but some of them aren't, you know, terribly controversial, I don't think. Happy to yield.
There are things in here which would provide information to those, could be a good or bad opportunity, but providing total numbers of active service clearances for contractors. Why would we tell people how many people are out there?
If you don't like it, vote no.
But that's not the point.
But it is the point. This is I mean, this is the House of Representatives. We're supposed to be able to deliberate on amendments, Democrat and Republican amendments, and we're not. And you know, if you want to structure this even more, fine, but shutting everybody out, that's the reason why this went down in suspension. And apparently, it didn't make any impression to the majority here, and we're going to have yet another closed rule, and I think that that's unfortunate, and I think it reflects badly on this institution. But then again, so much of what we've been doing up here in the last several months reflects badly on this institution and makes me very sad. So I yield back my time.
Thank you very much. The gentleman is entitled to his opinion, and I respect and appreciate that, but I think any review of the amendments would come to a conclusion. Mr. Cole.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Before I go on, may I make a brief introduction to a gentleman you've already entertained today? We have a member of the British Parliament here that's joining us today. He started off with the Texas, you know, with the chairman this morning. He's now going to Oklahoma. We don't think we're going to let it, and he's headed to Arkansas. So we're keeping him in safely red territory while he's over here. But full disclosure, he's a conservative member. So welcome. It's good to have you here.
We're delighted that you're here, and I enjoyed my time with you this morning.
Just quickly, because I know we don't have a lot of time, I want to thank both the gentlemen. I know this has been an interesting time to serve on your particular committee, controversy-free and bipartisan as always. But seriously, I appreciate very much the work that you do. I do ask this question about the underlying bill, if I may, Mr. Chairman. Was there, and I'll certainly ask my friend, the ranking member, the same question. Was there any, was this voted out, unanimously, or was there?
Typically, we've had a long run on this committee, I think since around 2011, of nearly every year we've got the bill out unanimously, and that's because of the strong bipartisan work that we do down there, and I think it's absolutely necessary because at the end of the day, we're in charge of keeping our nation's secrets, and it requires bipartisan cooperation.
Yeah, I would just say that one of the things the chairman and I were determined to do, notwithstanding any differences we might have had on the Russia issue, is make sure that it didn't get in the way of our everyday important oversight, that we got the bread and butter of the committee done, that is, make sure the agencies had the resources they need, had the proper safeguards in place, and I think we produced that in this bill. I do view, although we certainly have made exceptions over the years, view the bill much like the defense bill, and we probably wouldn't consider going to the floor without an opportunity to amend the defense bill. This bill covers a very substantial part of the federal workforce, a very substantial part of the national defense. So even a structure rule will give more members an opportunity to weigh in. But that's not a criticism of the underlying bill. I think the underlying bill is bipartisan and very solid.
Well, I appreciate the gentleman, and certainly we'll look at the amendments and come to a decision with regard to them. But it's good to know how well you do work together. I think sometimes that gets lost, and how much common agreement there is here. I get to see a little bit of what you see sitting on Defense Appropriations Committee, and you guys do an amazing job for this country, making sure that in a very dangerous world, we're as well informed as we can be, and we use the extraordinary assets and talents of our people in this area, and it's saved a lot of lives over the years. And I suppose, in a sense, we never really know how much you do for us. We can't know in some ways, and in other ways, it's hard to, know when the dog doesn't bark in the night that somebody kept the dog quiet. So just thanks for what you do. Appreciate it very much. Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the chairman and the ranking member for the work that I know that they do on behalf of all of us. Following on with what Mr. McGovern was commenting about, I find it strange that because this happens to be an Intelligence Authorization Act for this fiscal year, that it would be believed by some that members in this body are not capable of being reflective and offering their ideas without compromising the secrets of this nation. I, for one, happen to think overall, and not just as it pertains to intelligence, I think we talk too much. I think we don't hear of any kind of proceedings like we do in this great democracy of other countries and how they go about their particular matters. It's unusual that we have this kind of forthrightness, but I argue for members to have an opportunity to be participatory regardless of the committee of jurisdiction. Let me put a question to either or both of you. It appears from the substantive bill that we are dealing with that there are components of the Defense Intelligence Agency that are either eliminated or being moved to other sectors. Would you illuminate me more regarding same, either or both of you?
Sure, appreciate that, Mr. Hastings. So we're doing a deep dive on the Defense Intelligence Agency. It's been a long, ongoing investigation because they have nearly 100 roles and responsibilities that are underneath them. And quite frankly, we're trying to get them back in the defense intelligence business and trying to move towards a more efficient way to spend money. So this is just the first step, what will probably many steps in this investigation. So we've requested of the administration a whole series of documents that we will begin to comb through once they provide those, and I would expect next year to have hopefully what I would consider be even bolder reforms.
Mr. Schiff?
I would only say that there has been a continuing debate about some of the programs within DIA and how they either coordinate or don't coordinate, duplicate or don't duplicate efforts in other agencies. And so that has been a part of our examination, as well as whether certain functions that are performed by DIA should be rather moved to the USDI, the NDI. And so we are looking at those issues, and we are making some changes, as well as exploring whether others are also appropriate.
All right. I appreciate the
DNI,
response.
DNI, excuse
I'm
me.
sorry?
DNI, I said NDI, DNI.
Yeah. I still feel that members deserve an opportunity to fully debate such an important bill. And we know, all of us, that members have thoughts that they'd like to share because we've received amendments even without putting out a call for amendments. And I might add, there have been times when we have had a structured measure rule to give us guidance in this regard. I'm the former vice chair of the House Intelligence Committee, so I know how important this bill is to the security of the United States, and I also know that members who do not sit on the committee have valuable insights that deserve to be heard. For instance, I would have welcomed a robust discussion regarding minority hiring within the intelligence community. Either or both of you may know, I certainly you know, Mr. Schiff, that I followed on the work of Louis Stokes and Julian Dixon in ensuring that the intelligence community would have a perspective of ensuring that minorities are getting a chance to rise to the top ranks in the intelligence community. I can report to you all that I've met very recently with senior members of the intelligence community on this subject, and we're going backward. And I would like for us to have had that discussion. And I recognize at least two members of the Congressional Black Caucus are members of the Intelligence Committee. I don't know their work. I haven't inquired of them in that regard, but I see no evidence that they are doing the same kind of things that some of us had done in the past to assure that the myriad threats that we face around the world are being covered. I'm fond of saying, you know, you can have all white people in the intelligence community if you want to, but this nation ain't all white. And so you got to have some people that look like some other people and that act like some other people in order to be able to go forward. I would like to have had that debate on the floor of the House so that members who have a different view can have whatever they have to say. Additionally, in light of the fact that you all are doing an extraordinary job in examining the threat to our democracy that came from the last election, and doing everything I'm sure you can in counterintelligence and otherwise to ensure that it doesn't happen again. But I would believe it would benefit all of us if all of the members had an opportunity to discuss those threats from their perspective, both Republican and Democrat. And therefore, I, for one, believe that we don't have to do everything in the light of day regarding source and method, but we can be more forthcoming to the entirety of this group in order to be able to ensure that intelligence is operating in the best interest of the security of this nation. I yield back my time.
Mr. Hastings, Mr. Chairman, may I briefly address that? I just want Mr. Hastings to know that both Ms. Sewell and Mr. Carson have vigorously taken up the issue and the concern that you've had and you've led on in the past, and Ms. Sewell in particular has made it a constant element of her oversight of the agencies within her jurisdiction to find out what efforts are they making to diversifying, what metrics can be put in place so that we understand whether they're moving in the right direction or the wrong direction. I know during Director Brennan's tenure that he continually made that a priority, and I don't know whether we have the results that you're looking for. We probably haven't gone anywhere near as far as we need to, but I do want to assure you that there are members of the committee that have made this a very high priority and are vigorously pursuing it. So that work is going on.
That I believe to be true. Mr. Nunes, you were about to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know, Mr. Hastings, that there's not a day that goes by without us looking to increase diversity, primarily for a reason that you touched on a little bit, and that is that we need people who can go around the world that look like other people, and one of the things that we sorely lack in the intelligence agencies are people who can speak foreign languages and speak them well, and blend in other countries and work with our partners. And so you can rest assured, we're not pushing diversity for diversity's sake. We're pushing diversity to protect this country.
Absolutely. And both of your statements are in line with what I say, and I report to both of you in spite of Congresswoman Seward and Mr. Carson's efforts and those of the rest of you. We are behind, and we are behind because of a status quo attitude that exists within the respective agencies. And that's not right. And it needs to be addressed, and that's why we're discussing it now, and we're not giving away any great big secrets. I'm making a speech at the German Marshall Fund on 5 o'clock, and they've requested specifically dealing with Europe and the United States and the demographics that cause us, for security reasons, to make sure that we are diversifying the persons who provide that service for us. That said, I'll leave it at that, but we should be discussing this in a robust fashion on the floor of the House of Representatives, and I fear, although I have not seen the report on the rule, I fear that we're going to have a closed rule, and if we have a closed rule, we will have done ourselves a disservice on intelligence authorization or anything else.
Yes, sir. I thank the gentleman. Ms. Slaughter, did you wish to seek time?
Thank you, no.
Gentlewoman does not seek time. Dr. Burgess.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for doing this. Thanks to our witnesses for being here. Chairman Nunes, my only observation is this will be the first year in a long time that I've voted for an intelligence bill without the opportunity to sit down with the classified annex. And it was a week ago today that first became available. We had a classified briefing with Secretary of Defense and Secretary of State. It was the day we'd finished voting, and many of us were leaving town. There apparently was no time available on Monday before the 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock suspension vote. Now, there may have been time made available after this went into extra innings, but I've spent so much time up here with Chairman Sessions that I haven't had the ability. But I would just, it's important to some of us to be able to look at that. I realize it doesn't change much year over year, but it's our obligation to our constituents to review that. And in future years, if a little greater effort to make it more available just to the rank and file members who do like to go and view it.
Well, Mr. Burgess, we have had it available, and it's still available today. We'd love to get you down there and walk you through it. And it sounds like Chairman Sessions is keeping you too busy up here.
Well, I'd like to say we've been here for a good number of hours, but Dr. Burgess has for days, months, years. Dr. Burgess, in fact, does bring up a point a number of times prior necessarily to you being our chairman, where there was a difficult timing to the advantage of the member that was requesting it. And I, in my opinion, Dr. Burgess, have not heard of that since Devin has become, Mr. Nunes has become our chairman. But I think it is important to remember that not everybody fits necessarily on the same time frame.
Well, we want as many of you to come down and read it as possible, as quickly as possible.
Maybe it was an error, but my office was informed it would not be available after 5 p.m. And as you know, Mr. Chairman, sometimes we work
Well,
here
we're in trouble there.
until 5 p.m. That's the only observation. Again, I'm glad both of you are here. I'm glad both of you are on the job, and I'll yield back.
Thank you very much. Dr. Burgess, in his defense, serves as a subcommittee chairman for the Energy and Commerce Committee, as subcommittee chairman for Health. And his hours of operation span most of the day and then here most of the night. So these are the things which you and I have talked about and making them available that I've seen you bend over backwards and that I was alluded to in the beginning because there were regular comments about the availability of the committee. And I appreciate what the gentleman's done. Gentleman from Alabama, distinguished gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, first of all, as a member of the Armed Services Committee, let me thank you for what you do. On the Armed Services Committee, we're consumers of intelligence, and it is extraordinarily important to our job that we get the classified briefings that we get. We had one just the other day on North Korea that was extremely important for us to receive, and I know that that intelligence just doesn't come out of thin air. They're great professionals who produce it, but it's your work that helps set up the means by which it is produced. And I want to thank you for that and tell you how valuable it is to the rest of us that we get to look at it. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'm sure I could calculate this for myself, but approximately what percentage of the bill is classified?
Well, yeah. The part that you can read is unclassified, and the part that you can't read is classified. I don't think I can really
that was a good,
answer.
clear
I don't
answer.
think I can answer that question as a percentage.
Can you?
But I
It's
can
a
tell you that
significant amount.
it's a significant amount of it is classified because of the nature of the programs.
Got it, got it. And I asked that in the context of understanding a little bit about amendments to things that are classified. Kind of hard to do that
very hard,
without running afoul of the very important work that you do. I really appreciate in our briefings, by the way, when everybody comes in and admonishes at the beginning and at the end about the fact that these things cannot be divulged. We had a very good session the other day on North Korea, but we were given pretty strict instructions before and after about what we could say, which was not much. So I get it that what you do is so very important, so very critical that we have to keep it secret. It can't be, quote, open and transparent. We can't do that with a lot of what you do. Right. So you want to say something?
I was just going to say, Mr. Byrne, too, that Mr. Thornberry's committee, your committee, worked very closely with our committee because, as you know, we have some shared jurisdiction.
Right.
Those are also, you have a classified portion of the Armed Services Committee bill. We also have that, and we match that up. Right. And the only way you can view that is if you go down to to read the classified annex of the defense bill and the classified annex of our bill.
Yeah, and the thing about that seems to work is that we have exceptional people on your committee, and I know the people in your committee, they're exceptional people. I think we've got some pretty exceptional people on armed services, and to the extent that we all have to work in tandem, and the truth is all 435 of us have to work in tandem on this, has to be some sort of trust and confidence in the people that are the exceptional people that we have on your committee. And knowing them and knowing what they do and how they do it, I have that confidence. I have the confidence in the two of you. And so there are times when we have to go on that confidence and faith, and I appreciate the fact that you are the people you are, and that the people you have on your committee are the people they are, because it gives me great consolation that we can have that confidence in you. Mr. Schiff, I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. As I understand it, at the completion of the committee's consideration of the bill, and then with your remarks on the floor Monday, that you do support the bill. Is that right?
Yes, I do.
And I think you said it's a bipartisan good bill.
Absolutely.
Okay. You support having amendments made to it, but if there were no amendments made in order, you would still think this is a good bill?
It is a good bill as is, but I do support having the opportunity for other members to
I understand that.
put their own imprint on it. I would also say in terms of the classified versus unclassified part of it, like so much of our legislative work product here, it isn't going to be sufficient for you to go and simply read it. You really need somebody to sit and explain it.
Yep.
A lot of it may be funds allocated for different things that unless you have somebody to brief you about what's involved, you can read it, but you won't make much sense of it.
I've done that. And it is, even sometimes with the explanation, I'm not sure that those of us that don't sit on your committee and develop the tremendous expertise that y'all have can fully understand what's being said there. But as somebody that consumes the product, I do understand the product. And I understand enough about the process, even though I'm not on your committee. I understand enough about the process where I believe that the product is as good as we can get it. Nothing is perfect. We're all human beings, and the people that do this are human beings, and we got to depend upon them to give their best judgment to things, and they usually couch what they tell us that way. But I've been pretty impressed over the last 4 years with what I've seen. I just believe that I've seen some very good, hard work that's done that's really been produced under sometimes very difficult circumstances, but it's nonetheless critical to the decision-making that the people in the Defense Department have to make, the people we all have to make to authorize the Defense Department to do what it has to do. And I don't know, I haven't only been here 4 years, but I've been a citizen of this country for a long time. I don't know that I've ever seen a time in the history of our country, since I've been alive, when it's been more important, more critical for us to have good intelligence that we know we can rely on to the maximum extent possible, and that we have a process that we work together on. That's why your bipartisanship is so very important, because we can tell the people of America, this isn't a Republican thing, this isn't a Democrat thing. These are people, really good people on this committee, who work together to get us to the point where we have the sort of product that people on my committee can use and make the sort of prudential decisions we need to make, along with everybody else in Congress, to make sure we're defending America. So I appreciate the process you go through. I really appreciate what our intelligence folks do for us. And I appreciate the fact that you've come forward with a product that is this good. And whether I understand every little bit of it or not, I have confidence in you that you've produced the sort of product we need to move America forward. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I don't have a question, just you don't come in front of our committee very often, so I didn't want to lose the opportunity to express my thanks to both of you and to the whole community of intelligence community, as well as the committee for the hard work that you do. I associate myself with Mr. Burns' remarks. And I also wanted to particularly, I understand that much of what you deal with is classified and we are privy to that information, but to the extent possible, Mr. Chairman, you have done a very good job of exposing us to what you can or are able to help us understand the nature of some of the challenges that we face as a nation and the work that you're doing as a committee. And I just wanted to express my appreciation for that. And again, thank you both very much for your good work. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Thank you very much. Gentlewoman, Ms. Cheney.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think that it's clear everybody in this room, regardless of our party, wants to do what's best for the nation. It wants to do what's best for the security of the nation, for our intelligence community. I think we differ many times on how to get there, but I, too, want to commend you and the committee for what you've done. Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to ask you to clarify something. You said the part of the bill that you can't read is the classified part, but we all actually can go down and read it and sit with someone, as many of us have.
Ms. Cheney, I meant that that's the part
It's
that's
not
not
here,
here.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The part that you have to go down to the SCIF to read, yes.
And I have to say, my experience was the committee was extremely flexible and did provide someone to sit there and walk through as was necessary. I think that it's a very challenging process for us to make sure that as an entity and as a body, we conduct the kind of oversight we need to conduct. I think we've got the mix right. And frankly, Mr. Chairman, I can't imagine anything worse than opening up this bill to full debate on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives with 435 people and television cameras. And I think that we've got to be very careful and very concerned as we go through this, that we recognize that the intelligence loses its value if it is no longer kept classified, if it becomes something that is very easily leaked. And I think the process of having an intelligence committee, having a few people who have access to the sources and methods, the rest of us have access to be able to go and read the document, is the right mix. And I support having a closed rule for this for that reason. And I just want to say I thank very much the chairman and the ranking member for your work on this.
The gentlelady yield? Is that a yes or no?
Sure, Mr. McGovern, I'll yield.
All right, if the gentlelady doesn't want to open this up to a full and open debate, I mean, these are amendments that have been submitted in a bipartisan way. I don't see anything in here, unless the gentlelady sees something here, that if we were to debate this on the floor would somehow compromise our national security. We have had structured rules in the past.
Let me reclaim my time. I understand your point, but I think Mr. McGovern, or my colleague, Mr. Chairman, understands that in many instances, recognizing the validity or the lack of validity of these amendments requires an understanding and the ability to talk about the underlying parts of the bill which they're amending. And you and I may disagree on this issue, but I think I absolutely will stand up every single day and say it would be a mistake to have an open debate on the floor of the House of Representatives about our oversight of the nation's intelligence programs. And I feel strongly that we've got the mix right, and I yield back my time, Mr.
I'm just
Chairman.
amazed that.
I'm not yielding. I yielded to you, Mr.
Need to
McGovern.
Justify a closed process, not only on
Mr. McGovern, are we allowed to ask your British parliamentarian a question? Did he choose? Was he assigned you, or did he have free choice?
He got the short straw.
I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Can I just say on that point, Mr. Chairman?
Gentlewoman yields back. Excuse me just a moment, please. Gentlewoman yields back. Does gentleman seek time?
I do, just to...
Gentleman's recognized.
Just to say that the first time I had a British parliamentarian follow me was about 10 years ago. They came out to my district. We had a parade that weekend just by happenstance, and they got to ride in the actual Batmobile. And after that, I became the most popular member for British parliamentarians to shadow.
Yeah.
But I have not been able to duplicate it since.
Did you introduce him to your dad? No. Yeah, okay. Well, these things happen. Look, I am aware that we have amendments before us. We've got a couple members who are here that will wish to engage the committee. I want to thank both of you for taking time. I'm well aware that a good bit of information that the public becomes aware of is intriguing to them, not only concerning Russia, concerning North Korea, concerning a lot of issues, and I appreciate both of you sticking to the main purpose, and that is making sure our intelligence organizations are prepared and ready for their future, and I think you've done that well today, and I want to thank you. Please remember that we have an awesome stenographer who would love to take anything you brought in writing as she finishes her report for today. I want to thank you very much. We appear to have at least, I think, two members who would wish to, Mr. Chairman, not yet, who would wish to provide feedback on this H.R. 3180. If there's any member that would seek to provide feedback on any amendment that they would have, I would encourage them, if they chose, to come forth at this time. The gentleman, Mr. Hill, Eagle Scout from Arkansas. The gentleman from California. We're delighted that both of you are here, gentlemen. Without objection, anything you brought in writing will be entered in the record, and please do remember as you leave to help our stenographer out. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
I thank the chairman, thank the ranking member for the hearing today. Appreciate the opportunity to present views. My shadowing British parliamentarian was here for a few moments too. He's from Kent, Raymond Chisty, and I told him that Arkansas was the Kent of America. So he looks forward to coming to one of the most beautiful places in our country over the weekend. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. In Section 603 of the bill is a requirement for our intelligence community to report on security clearances. My short and simple amendment only adds one thing to that report, which is to include the total number of active security clearances for federal employees and the total number of active security clearances for contractors. According to a 2014 OMB report commissioned by President Obama, more than 5.1 million people held a security clearance. As I'm sure you will all recall, a former NSA contractor, Reality Lee Winter, was arrested in June for leaking classified information to the media. I heard from many of my constituents about this matter. questioning how in the world did this happen and how do we select who's not an employee, receives a security clearance. Members of Congress should know in the annual report on security clearances exactly how many active security clearances are out there and how many are held by federal employees as compared to federal contractors. And should there be concern on that distinction being noted in this legislation and that it remain classified, I would recall that paragraph 3 of this proposed legislation offers that classified annex protection. And when we see that number of distinction between contractors and federal employees, I think it will inform Congress as to whether or not to evaluate the number of security clearances that we issue, to whom, and by what means. And I'd be happy to respond to questions. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Sessions, Ranking Member Slaughter, distinguished members of the committee. I'm here to testify on an amendment that I've submitted along with Representative Conyers and Representative Lee. This amendment would prohibit any U.S. tax dollars going towards interference in domestic elections of a foreign country. It includes hacking of parties, manipulating electoral systems, and promoting media outside of the U.S. that favors one candidate or another in a foreign country. Like everyone on this committee, I voted for sanctioning Russia for their interference in our democratic elections. Russia should be punished for their meddling, and we all should have a concern about other nations meddling in elections. Russia is reported to have meddled in President Macron's election in France. But the United States has always led. We helped lead with the Human Rights Declaration in the 1940s in setting the standard that there should not be interference in other sovereign countries' elections, and it's time for us to lead again. We shouldn't relitigate who has interfered where. Instead, we should give our president the authority to go to the G20 and say, we have taken this voluntary pledge that we are never going to interfere, and we ask Russia and the other G20 countries to do the same. The final point I'll say is that our record has been far better than most of our European allies. While they were colonizing the world, we were advocating decolonization. We should lead again and make it clear that no nation should interfere in another sovereign nation's elections. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Does any member of the committee have questions? Yes, sir.
I just want to thank both gentlemen for being here. I think they're good amendments, and they should be brought to the floor. Unlike my colleagues up here, I don't think Western civilization as we know it will collapse if we talk about these issues on the floor. That's what we're supposed to do. And with all due respect to the chairman and ranking member of the Intelligence Committee, or any committee, a small group don't have a monopoly on all good ideas. These are good amendments that ought to be made in order, and I hope that they will be. We'll try to make them in order. I thank them. Thank you for being here.
Yes, sir. Any other members seek time? Thank you, Judge. Gentlewoman from New York, thank you. Any other comments from the committee? Thank you both. We appreciate you taking time to be here. We would now move to ask if there are any other members that would seek to speak to the committee about H.R. 3180, Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2018. Seeing none, this closes the hearing portion of that section. We would now open up S114, Department of Veterans Affairs Bonus Transparency Act, and we know that we have two distinguished gentlemen who've spent time before the Rules Committee, and their testimony, their presentation, and their professionalism will exemplary. And we appreciate both of you coming back today. Without objection, anything you have in writing will be entered the record. And Mr. Chairman, you're now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Slaughter. We appreciate the opportunity to be here today in support of an amendment in nature of a substitute to S114 as amended, the VA Choice and Quality Improvement Act of 2017. This bill would expand access to care for veteran patients through the Department of Veterans Affairs providers in all and VA medical facilities and in the community by providing $2.1 billion in funding to sustain the Choice program by authorizing 28 VA major medical facility leases and by improving the VA's ability to recruit and retain high-quality employees. And just in a synopsis, we know that 3 years ago in Phoenix, we had a terrible tragedy happen with veterans on waiting lists. We, in a bipartisan way, put the CHOICE program, which was an emergency program, to help shorten those waiting lists. And to be frank, it got started off with not very well. But by the end of the third year, it's beginning to work very well. We had an estimate when we signed the extension of CHOICE back in April that that money we had would last until next February. There was so much usage of the program by veterans that the money runs out in about 2 weeks. We cannot let that happen. We have veterans out there that are undergoing chemotherapy. Maybe there may be a pregnant veteran. We need to do this to extend the program, and let me explain why very briefly. The VA has 6 ways plus choice that they provide non-VA care. This will give our committee the next year, actually the next few months, to bring a consolidated program where if you're a veteran and you go in the VA, there's one way you get non-VA care. It's simpler, quicker, more efficient, and cost savings. So we need that time, that 1-year bridge, and we'll be back here in 6 months with another ask. We're going to have that year to implement this program. And, Mr. Chairman, that's why we're here today. It's a great bill. We appreciate the Rules Committee's time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Your attention to this detail combined with your ranking member is very important to all of us who are concerned about the job and job performance. Ms. Walsh, we're delighted that you're here, and the gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Chairman,
Yes, sir.
and thank you to the ranking member. Mr. Rowe clearly explained what's in this bill, and again, we approach this as we always do in this committee of what is best for this nation's veterans. How do we include all of the stakeholders, including the veteran service organizations and everyone who's involved in this? I would just say, with a little bit of setback from Monday, the fairness, the openness, and the desire to get this right that Chairman Rowe showed, I think, is a sterling example of how things can work here. These are not easy lifts. These are challenging issues that come up. And the respect that was given to allow for the differences that we had of opinion to make sure that I could go back to my members and assure them that this is a piece of legislation supported by all the veteran service organizations. It is supported by the employees at the VA. It is supported by our rank and file veterans on the ground. That took compromise. That took giving some things, and with an understanding that the same thing holds true in a diverse caucus on my the Republican side. And so, with that being said, rest assured that Monday had as much to do with us to figure out how we can get something through the United States Senate as anything else. And I appreciate that willingness to not make a political statement of what can't be done, but to embrace the politics of the possible, always in the interest of our veterans. And that happened in this. I would encourage all of you, this is the way it should be done. We stand shoulder to shoulder on this. This is the right piece of legislation. It fixes what needs to be done. More importantly, it leaves the door open for long-term reforms that will improve the delivery of care in the VA and outside the VA, and I think that's just as important. So with that, I encourage you, your support, and appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Tim, thank you very much. Obviously, we have highlighted your service to this great nation, not only from a standard-bearer of the leadership that you provided, but also the service as a member of Congress. And I want to thank both of you. It is particularly delightful to know that you both struggle with the same issue, to come up with the same answer, to come up with the same resolve, and to handle difficult matters without shirking a task or responsibility. It is not always easy to come back and say, well, we were going down the right path, but we're tired of it. We cannot get tired of knowing that we need to support these men and women. You heard me say last time, I'm going to do it again in the future, but I work with a group called Whiskers for Warriors, and there's a bunch of guys that look like ZZ Top. And they show up and they say, you know, we walk in a room, the guys mostly say, you're here to repo my car. They look like they're there to do that, but in fact, they're American men and women who feel deeply indebted to the men and women who have protected this country. Some of them served, some of them did not. They trust what you're doing because they see the activities of you two together, and I reinforce that every time I can. I want to thank both of you very much for your presentation today. Chairman Cole?
Always a pleasure to see my good friends up here, but I have no questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Slaughter?
I do. I want to thank Dr. Rowe publicly for giving me a good amount of time this morning on an issue of my own veterans clinic. I came away there absolutely convinced that the committee's in the right hands, and particularly because you agree with me almost everything, right? We did have a conversation. First, he's from Tennessee, I'm from Kentucky, and we tried to see who was the poorest. We tried to outpoor each other, which is common from our part of the country. That's the way we start conversations. And I've known Tim, of course, since he's been here. And the veterans situation has become critical. I'm really pleased that you're looking at the choice. It just isn't working in my district at all. Almost all the complaints we're getting now from veterans is lack of ability to get any kind of service at all and then getting a bill for it. So thank you both for it. I certainly support this bill and look forward to working to iron out some of the problems we talked about this morning, Dr. Rowe. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Ms. Slaughter, the gentleman, Chairman Rowe, is an Eagle Scout, and he believes in trying to leave his campsite better than the way he found it. And as he was walking around to members seeking concurrence to be our chairman, he told me, Pete, I promise you, I will tackle every problem and work for every member of this body. And every member means every member. Well, he is a fine Eagle Scout. We're really proud of him also, so thank you. Mr. McGovern? Thank you very much. Is there any other member that would seek time?
Mr. Chairman?
Gentleman's recognized.
I just want to say it is always a highlight of the Rules Committee to have you all shoulder to shoulder. Monday was a disturbing time in the world with folks on both sides of that issue, and I feel like as we finish the week, all is right again with the world of all the things that we get to go home and talk to folks about. It's not the partisan squeakers that excite them most. It's those times where we've found unity in problem solving that excites folks most, and I'm grateful to you for your leadership and giving us the ability to go home and brag on your success. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Very nice. I, too, would like to associate myself with those comments from the gentleman. Is there anyone else that would seek time? Gentleman from Louisville, Texas, Dr. Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and again, thanks to both of our members for being here today. Much earlier in my congressional career, a representative from the state of Nebraska, Tom Osborne, had been a football coach in a previous life, and I remember him doing a special order on the floor of the House. I guess he didn't have a VA hospital in the state of Nebraska, and his veterans would have to travel 200-300 miles in order to be seen, and how he longed for something like the Veterans Choice Act. Now, I do hear from my doctors, and not just my doctors, other doctors in the state at other VA facilities, how there needs to be a streamlining when, in some areas in public payments, we're told to bundle payments that will not just pay for a specific procedure, but it's a whole episode of care. But then one of the complaints I hear from VA doctors is someone will need a rotator cuff repair. And it should be automatic that the rehab physical therapy is approved at the same time. They shouldn't have to come back and spend 4 hours in the clinic post-op with a sore shoulder, waiting to get into a waiting line to get into a rehab facility. I know you all are aware of those things, and I do want to see it work, but I also reflect on the fact we've come so far since Coach Osborne did those special order hours on the floor talking about his veterans in Nebraska having literally no place to go, and you all have effectively solved that problem. Like Representative Woodall, I felt a great disturbance in the force on Monday. I'm glad you worked it out. Mr. Waltz, you're incredibly fortunate to have as gracious a chairman as Dr. Rowe. I can think of other people with whom we work up here that might not have been so gracious and sent us all home for the month of August with the problem being unresolved and let our constituents chew on us for a little while and get our problems solved and get back to work for the American people. But you all did it. I'm grateful that you did.
They chew on both of us, too.
I understand.
No, I understand how grateful I am, and as the veterans are too. And I would say this, as someone who grew up in Nebraska, in all fairness, there just aren't a lot of places in general to go in Nebraska. So it's not just VA hospitals. So I can tell you that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'll defend your state. I think it's a great state. I think it's a great state. And Coach Osborne was a fine member. Certainly other member that would seek time. Gentleman from Alabama.
Gentlemen, thank you. I like your bill, certainly support it, but I would be remiss if I didn't say something to you about the continued complaints I get about the program. It is being administered and implemented by the VA in a much too restrictive fashion. That was not our intent. That was not your intent when we passed this 3 years ago, I guess. I have a bill to broaden it out, and I know that it's controversial because it would take control away from the VA, and frankly, the way the VA's been using the power we've given them tells me I think we should take the control away from them. But I would just like to use this moment to tell you that this program could be so much better, not because of what we haven't done, but because of the way the VA has chosen in the past to implement it. We have new leadership at the VA. I believe in giving somebody a chance to prove themselves. I hope that our new leadership at the VA will take the tools that we've given them to substantially improve their performance. Because I got to tell you, my veterans are pretty darn angry, and they've got every right to be angry because we deal with their cases every day. 70% of the casework in my district office is VA. 70%. I don't care what it is. If you're spending 70% of your time on one problem, something's wrong. And we've all faced it. But the problems that we're facing with the health care for my veterans, they actually had to shut down the inpatient surgery operation at the Biloxi Hospital because of their mortality rates were too high. They shut it down because they were killing veterans on the operating table. Now, we've got great hospitals throughout the Gulf Coast that could handle those folks with very professional, experienced surgeons who could do that work just as well or better than the doctors in the VA hospital. If we can't do better, then we need to give our veterans a card and say, just like a TRICARE card, say, go get your health care, and not lock them into a system that continues to fail them. So because of the extent to which we have to deal with this in my office, I would be remiss if I didn't take this moment to tell you, and I know you've heard this from others before, this is a serious problem. I know this takes us some step along the way to making things better, but we've got to demand more from VA, and if not, just take it away from them. And if one of y'all want to respond to that, I'd be happy to give you an opportunity.
I think certainly you have our commitment, both sides of the aisle. We've been given a unique opportunity. We have a new director, Dr. Shulkin. Dr. Shulkin's had experience on the outside and the inside. There are some things that the VA does second to none. I mean, absolutely outstanding care. I've traveled all over the country looking at VAs and will continue to do that in my position, and so is Mr. Walls. There are some places they don't do very well, and that's one of the reasons that we put the choice program in there, was it so patients who were not getting the kind of care they needed could seek care elsewhere. What Dr. Burgess mentions is extremely important, is to be able to, and we're going to implement this with the second, with our Choice 2.0, Care 2.0, or the quality measures, so that a veteran would know that they're getting quality wherever, whether it's done outside or inside. So we see that whether the quality of care that you receive on the outside, it may not be good either. So we want to be able to measure that, and we're going to have the systems in which to do that. So a veteran can then know whether their care is quality or not. And I think we're committed to it. I know I am, and I know he is. I know our committee is. We hear this, Ms. Slaughter and I. We had a wonderful extended conversation this morning, and what she said to me, I've heard many places before, just heard it again from you, and I'll hear it probably if everyone at this dais wanted to speak. But you have our commitment. We're going to try to make it better. Thank you.
I would echo that, and what this piece of legislation does to kind of segue and tie it back together is it opens up that space to continue what I do think has been unprecedented collaboration, cooperation of all stakeholders to move this along. It's not a simplistic solution on this. If you've been to one VA hospital, you've been to one. I have the privilege of representing the Mayo Clinic, who will tell you the cardiac surgeons in the Minneapolis VA are as good as anybody you'll find. Dr. Burgess has experience there. But the fact of the matter is, much like Dr. Osborne's constituents, mine in Sleepy Eye, Minnesota, if they can go in and get care locally, would rather do that. When there's something big and the research that needs to stay inside the VA, when we poll the VFW members, 92% of them, a choice of using the VA. They want to use the VA. So using the system that's there is also a choice. It is going to be a hybrid model that makes sense, and it is a reality of our evolving healthcare system. We have VA hospitals that were designed after World War II to have 150 patients. They have 3 in them. Dr. Burgess and I have talked about if the community hospital has a wing that has the VA symbol on it and they're integrated, that's what it's going to look like. So I am not committed to the simplistic argument that it's privatization versus non-privatization, because there's folks you could give a card to, Mr. Byrne, then there'd be no doctor there in the private sector to help them either. There'd be no accountability, and we don't know what the cost would necessarily be. But it doesn't mean that we can't find that solution to put some of that coordinated care.
Taking my time back, I'm not suggesting that it's one or the other, because there are some VA facilities that do a good job, but there are rampant stories and data that indicate that all too often, VA, we fail our veterans with the poor, or in some cases, non-existent health care that they get. And sometimes they get it so late it doesn't mean anything. And sometimes that's just poor management, and sometimes it's poor doctoring. From my perspective, I don't really care which it is. I just want my veterans to get what they need when they need it and as they need it. And that just hasn't been the case in my district and a lot of districts around America. And it's not your fault. Y'all are working as hard as you can to make it. One thing I do tell my constituents when I talk to them, and at every town hall we get questions about, complaints about the VA. One thing I tell them is that everybody in Washington, Democrat and Republican, are concerned about this, or working on it and want to make this better. I know this is a bipartisan thing. Y'all are trying to move the ball down the road in a way that y'all think, and y'all have a lot of expertise in this that I don't have. But I feel strongly about taking care of my veterans. That's my job. I know it's y'all's job for your constituents. And so every time I hear one of these problems, I'm sorry, I'm going to be a broken record. I'm going to come back and say, this has got to be fixed.
You know, just to your comment, and I don't know the specific issues where you are, but it's just the opposite where I live. I have a major VA medical center a mile from my front door, and I almost never hear anything negative. It's almost always positive. And it's remarkable the difference when you travel around the country.
Well, I hesitate to invite you to come down to listen to the complaints that I get. I'll just send you some anecdotes or excerpts from time to time. If it is happening in this place but not in that place, that tells you something right there.
Yeah, it does.
I mean, that should be like the reddest of the red flags. But I'm telling you, we got a problem. We have a problem with the Montgomery operation. We have a problem with this operation in Biloxi. It's taken us years to build a new outpatient clinic in Mobile. And we're finally breaking ground on that next month, and God knows how long it's taken to build it. It's just the most egregiously poor leadership and administration I have seen in anything in my life. So I do appreciate your leadership. I support this bill, but I truly would be remiss on behalf of my veterans if I wouldn't let you know we got a real problem where I am. And I yield back.
Gentleman from Pasco, Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank both the gentlemen for being here in front of us, Mr. Waltz, Dr. Rowe, and kind of a segue from Mr. Byrne. He's inviting you to Alabama. You actually came, Dr. Rowe, to the state of Washington, and I appreciated that very much to visit at least one of my CBOCs, some of our professionals in the VA system, and that was very, very helpful, and I thought helpful for you as chairman of the committee to see firsthand what's going on in another state. And the invitation is open for you, Mr. Waltz, to do the same thing. So flexibility with the choice program has been brought up. I'd just add my second to that would be a very big improvement if we could add more flexibility. But I wanted to, this is a bill that has to do with employment. I wanted to reiterate an issue I think came up when we were in Richland. Part of the process for hiring professionals, doctors, is that it just takes a long time. And when you've got somebody coming out of med school, for instance, or someone that's moving to a new area wants to and has family obligations and financial obligations, they can't wait 6 months or more to get a decision from the VA on whether they're going to go to work or not. They're going to go somewhere else that can come up with a decision quicker. So is there something that I've missed in this bill that addresses that, or are there are there plans that you're looking at to address that
This
issue?
does do that. We have also done something to allow the secretary to act more quickly, to hire directors and so forth. And then the second part of this bill, which we'll do in a few months from now, will add some money to be able to attract people, and let's say a dermatologist or a neurologist. Those folks are hard to get. There will be some incentives in there to do that. So yes, they take forever.
They do.
And do.
Yeah.
And I've recruited a lot of doctors in my practice, and it boggles my brain how long it takes them to do that.
You can't compete if you're going to be so
No.
slow off the dime to
Oh,
offer
you're
a
correct.
position.
We need a job, you need a
Yeah.
paycheck, and
Yeah.
so you go where you get one.
And this takes us a forward step to be more competitive as well, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, which is also another problem that was identified. And well, good, with that clarity, I feel much more comfortable with the bill, and I think it does address some of those issues that need to be addressed. And thank you very much for your work on this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back his time. Is there any other member that seek time? Seeing none, thank you very much. I want to thank each of you for taking time to be with us today. Please remember, you're going to bring anything you brought in writing for us, some stenographer. Is there any other member that would seek to speak to the committee about S114? Seeing none, this now closes the hearing portion of S114. Chairman, now being received a motion from the gentleman from Oklahoma.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee grant H.R. 3180, the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2018, a closed rule. The rule provides 1 hour of debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence now printed in the bill shall be considered as adopted, and the bill as amended shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the bill as amended. The rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instructions. Section 2 of the rule waives the requirement of Clause 6A of Rule 13 for a two-thirds vote to consider a report from the Committee on Rules on the same day it is presented to the House with respect to any resolution reported through the legislative day of August 1st, 2017. Section 3 of the rule provides that on any legislative day during the period from July 31st, 2017 through September 4th, 2017, the journal of the proceedings of the previous day shall be considered as approved, and the chair may at any time declare the House adjourned to meet at a date and time to be announced by the chair in declaring the adjournment. Section 4 of the rule provides that the Speaker may appoint members to perform the duties of chair for the duration of the period addressed in Section 3. Section 5 of the rule provides that each day during the period addressed by Section 3, the resolution shall not constitute a calendar day for the purpose of Section 7 of the War Powers Resolution. Section 6 of the rule provides that each day during the period addressed by Section 3 of the resolution shall not constitute a legislative day for purposes of Clause 7 of Rule 13. Finally, Section 7 of the rule provides that each day during the period addressed by Section 3 of the resolution shall not constitute a calendar day or legislative day for the purposes of Clause 7, C1 of Rule 22.
You now hear the motion from the gentleman from Oklahoma. Is there amendment or discussion to that?
Yes.
Gentlewoman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee strike the waiver of Clause 6A of Rule 13, granting martial law authority, and I'd like to speak on it if I may.
Gentlewoman's recognized.
Mr. Chairman, the Senate is over on the other side, writing and voting and rewriting and revoting to the point where even they have no idea what their health care bill will look like in the end. In fact, Senator Corker said just today, I quote, "The substance of this is not what's relevant. What's relevant is getting to conference," end quote. Several other senators have indicated they would only vote for the so-called skinny repeal to get to conference. Senator McCain said if the House passed the Senate bill, I would be very worried about the product, end quote. Senator Johnson was so shocked by reports that the House could skip conference that his response was simply, "Say what? Come again?" We're talking about a bill that will have very real, very serious, very dangerous consequences for millions of Americans, and passing a martial law rule that will allow you to rush the Senate bill through the House on the same day that we receive it. Has anyone told the Senate what you're up to? It sounds to me like Senate Republicans are playing with fire if they're expecting a conference because this martial law will allow you to jam their exact bill through the House in the blink of an eye. As we've said time and time again, a bad process leads to bad policy, and I believe this is the worst process I've ever seen. Are you hoping that if you move quickly enough, no one will figure out just how many people this bill will hurt? I wish I could be more specific about my objections to the bill, how much it would cut Medicaid, how many people would lose coverage, whether it will protect people with pre-existing conditions and more than that. But the truth is, I don't know any specifics, and neither do you. And I'm honestly stunned that we're here considering a martial law rule on legislation of this magnitude, 1/6 of the nation's economy. And this is a blanket martial law rule, which would allow you to bring anything to the floor the same day we receive it. Mr. Chairman, as now Speaker Paul Ryan said in July 2009 of the ACA, and I quote, "We shouldn't rush this thing through just to rush it through for some artificial deadline. Let's get this thing done right," end quote. And 8 months later than the time he said that, in March of 2010, the ACA was signed into law. You're building this plane as you're flying it. That's no way to handle a bill that will impact, as I said, 1/6 of our economy. Solution is not to jam it through in hopes that no one notices, because people will notice when their premiums and deductibles skyrocket, when their plans only cover the bare minimum, when they can't afford coverage anymore. I hope it doesn't get to that point, but I truly fear it will if we continue down this road. And I think the only reason you're doing this is because you know there's no public support for this bill, and you want to pass it before people figure out what you're doing. So I really hope that you will take a quick consideration here and vote yes on this amendment to strike that clause of the 2/3 vote. And I thank you very much.
Thank you very
Hope for
much.
yes vote.
Any further
Yes,
discussion?
Mr.
Gentleman
Chairman?
of Massachusetts.
Yeah, I mean, I want to speak in strong support of the gentlelady's amendment. This is hard to believe that we're actually going through this exercise. We had a process in the House that was horrendous by any measure. No hearings, people didn't see the bill until a matter of a couple of hours before we voted on it. Didn't even wait for a CBO score. We find out the CBO score, find out that tens of millions of people will lose their health care. And then now we have a process in the Senate that really is no better. No hearings, no input, no bill. We don't even know what the hell the bill is going to be by the end of the day. Democrats can't even figure out what amendments to offer because they don't know what the text of the bill is going to be. And now we're being told that whatever can be cobbled together, will come before the House most likely without a conference, and that's what we're going to vote on? This is people's health care. I don't know what you people are thinking. I mean, this is serious. I mean, these are real people. People's lives are in the balance here. A girl with leukemia who would hit her lifetime limit for health care by age 5. A man with heart disease who would be denied coverage because of his pre-existing condition. An expectant mother who was counting on her health insurance covering maternity benefits. I mean, these are our neighbors, our friends, our constituents. I mean, we all came here to help people. I'm not here to argue that the Affordable Care Act is perfect. I mean, we will tell you that it is not. But when it comes to changing things on health care, there needs to be a more deliberative process. And this is just unbelievable. I mean, to try to pass something so Donald Trump can get before a podium and tell everybody we had a success when, for a headline for 2 minutes? This is crazy. You owe it to your constituents to slow this process down, because right now this process is beyond the pale. And I would hope that my colleagues would vote for the Slaughter Amendment. I yield back.
Further
With great
discussion?
disgust.
Gentleman's recognized. Yes, sir.
Be in a rush, and there's
I'm
vote
certainly
in
not
progress.
rushing us.
Yeah, well, then I would hope that members would rotate themselves so that we can continue our discussion.
I have no problem with that.
No
If we'd
problem,
like-
Mr.
If
Chairman.
we'd like to do that,
Trying to be courteous and don't have members miss votes, and we
Well,
can go
we-
down there and cast these 6 votes and come back up here. But in the interim, then, Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the rule.
well, we're still working off the
Mine
gentlewoman.
has not been.
All right, then let me add discussion to what Ms. Slaughter has offered as an amendment. You know and I know,
and everybody in here knows, that if this particular measure comes to us after the Senate has jaw-jacked for however long it is they're going to on into the night, and then they pass what seems to be what they keep calling their skinny bill, it's going to then be treated as if you have, on the Senate side, repealed something. And then it comes over here, and ostensibly what we're supposed to learn is that it can go to conference. But by this measure, you're allowed to pass it most immediately and then go on home and tell people a lie and say that you repealed something. Now, that's not right, and we all know it. And in the spirit of trying to do what is right by this nation, we should not be carrying on a process like this. It's outrageous, and I will have an amendment after this one, no doubt, is defeated.
Thank you very much. Further discussion? Okay, we'll go vote on the Slaughter Amendment. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
Roll
Those have
call,
it.
please.
Gentlewoman asks for roll call vote.
Mr. Cole.
Clerk will poll the committee.
Mr. Cole, no. Mr. Woodall. Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess, no. Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins, no. Mr. Byrne. Mr. Byrne, no. Mr. Newhouse. Mr. Newhouse, no. Mr. Buck. Mr. Buck, no. Ms. Cheney. Ms. Cheney, no. Ms. Slaughter.
Aye.
Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern.
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings.
Aye.
Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis. Aye. Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 9 nays.
Amendment's not agreed to, not agreed to for amendment or discussion.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman.
Mr. Chairman, before I offer an amendment, I have a unanimous consent request to place into the record an article that is a political article in today's Politico.
Without objection, we'll let it on that record.
In that article, it begins by saying Mitch McConnell is making one last frantic plea to his Senate Republican members to advance the party's scale-back Obamacare repeal, assuring them at a private lunch that the vote is merely aimed at getting to conference with the House rather than immediately becoming law. Now, there are probably senator members, and I hope they hear my voice, that believe that when they vote at 11 o'clock tonight or 2 o'clock this morning, that they're going to be voting on something that is going to go to conference. I caution you that that likely may not occur. And if we want to be assured of that, then, Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the rule, and I move to limit the waiver of Clause 6A of Rule 13 to motions to go to conference. Let me repeat. I move to limit the waiver of Clause 6A of Rule 13 to motions to go to conference. And I have a further discussion regarding same, if the chair will permit.
If you have further discussions, feel free.
If this martial law is simply to allow the House to move to go to conference on the Senate health care repeal bill, and I also think it's absolutely, we know in the other body that they have arcane rules. But those people over there talking about amending something and they don't even have an idea, and the same article points to it, they don't have an idea of what it is that they're ultimately going to vote on. I just think that that is absurd. So then why not limit it to motions to go to conference? You prove to me right here, right now, that you wanted whatever comes over there to go to conference. And this blanket martial law rule would allow the House to pass the Senate bill as soon as we receive it. Over the Senate's objections, apparently it would happen that way. So why not alleviate that concern right now and limit the martial law?
Further discussion? We'll vote. We'll vote now on the Hastings Amendment. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. No. Noes have it, noes have it.
Roll call?
The gentleman
I ask for a roll call.
Gentleman asks for a roll call vote. Clerk will poll the committee.
Mr. Cole. No. Mr. Cole, no. Mr. Woodall. No. Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess, no. Mr. Collins. No. Mr. Collins, no. Mr. Byrne. Mr. Byrne, no. Mr. Newhouse. No. Mr. Newhouse, no. Mr. Buck. Mr. Buck, no. Ms. Cheney. No. Ms. Cheney, no. Ms. Slaughter.
Aye.
Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern.
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings.
Yes.
Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis.
Aye.
Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 9 nays.
The amendment's not agreed to. Further amendment or
I have an
discussion,
amendment,
gentleman
Mr.
from Massachusetts.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the rule. I move to limit the waiver of Clause 6A of Rule 13 to bills that have a CBO score. If in fact you are going to try to shove a health care bill down the throats of the American people, people ought to know how many of them are going to lose health care in this country. They ought to know what the true costs are going to be. And I don't see any reasonable argument for waiting until we get a CBO score so we all know what we're talking about. I mean, this is a big deal. This is the health care for millions and millions of Americans. And, and the idea that we're rushing this through with no hearings, with no input from anybody, I mean, this goes beyond the pale, and I don't get it. And I think but this has the potential to do great harm to people in this country, to millions of people in this country, and a lot of those people you represent. I mean, process matters, and a lousy process usually leads to lousy legislation. And this is almost a process that's not existent. So let's at least know the impact of whatever the Senate decides to pass before it comes before this House, before we vote on it.
Further discussion? Gentleman from Alabama.
I just want to make sure I make the record clear that I have had input from hundreds, if not thousands, of people in my district about our bill that was passed out of the House and Obamacare. So I've had plenty of input from the citizens I represent, some of whom are outraged at what's happened to them under Obamacare. I think we spent over 20 hours in this room with our bill. That doesn't count all the hours that the other committees spent on their bill. There has been an enormous amount of time in this House spent on this process. Now, I'm not a member of the United States Senate. I haven't a clue what they're going to do over there.
And yet we're going to come under martial law
No,
to
sir.
rush a bill to the floor? You
I
don't
have
have
the
a
floor,
clue
Mr.
what's going on?
McGovern, and the one thing I would like to ask you to do is let me finish what I have to say, and then you can say whatever you want
I will.
to say. Clearly
I
you
will.
will.
I still have the right to speak.
Yes, sir, you do, as do I, uninterrupted. I think everybody in here has a right to speak uninterrupted. When it's your turn to speak, speak. When it's my turn to speak, let me finish.
Are you finished?
No.
All right.
There's going to be plenty of time for us to look at this bill, whatever it is that comes over from the Senate. No one is trying to rush anything through. Trust me, with our side of the aisle, you can't rush things through. Not possible. The way we are structured, the sort of people we have, you try to ram something down our throat, it's going to come back up every time. Most of us think that, on this side of the aisle, think that whatever comes from over there is probably something that's just a vehicle to get us to conference. So we're not going to come over here and in one day just ram something through. I'm not for that. I don't think anybody here is for that. We got to understand it first. And I can guarantee you, I don't understand it because I don't know even what they're thinking today. They've had several things up, they voted them down, and now they keep trying new things. So I don't want anybody to interpret, and particularly if any of my constituents happen to be watching this, to interpret that I'm not getting the hundreds, if not thousands, of people that give me feedback about this law. I have. I've been listening for years now about it. And I have looked very carefully at all the bills that have come before this committee, all the amendments that came before the committee. I had plenty of time. We all had plenty of time to do it. And I understood the ramifications of what we were doing and had all sorts of analysis available to me. I feel well-informed about what we voted on in this committee, and I'm not going to vote on something in this committee or on that floor that I don't feel well-informed on. And if I think that what's coming from over there needs some study, then I'm going to insist that it get the study it needs. And if we decide to go to conference, then I assume y'all will appoint good people to the conference committee. We'll appoint good people to the conference committee. The Senate will appoint good people to the conference committee. And we may or may not get a work product out of it. But the assumption that's being made on the other side here that all we're doing is trying to ram something down your throat is erroneous, because if we ram it down your throat, we're ramming it down our own throats. And I don't want that. I don't think my people elected me to come up here and have it rammed down my throat. So please do not believe for 1 second that at least this member of the Rules Committee, this member of the House of Representatives, wants to ram anything down your throat, because if I do that, I've got to ram it down my own throat, and I don't want to do that. I don't think the people of America want us to do that, and I yield back.
Well, with
Thank you very much,
with-
gentlemen. If you hold just one moment. A few, 15 or 20 minutes ago, the bell rang of a vote. I would like to continue. We are not trying to rush anyone, but I would like to say that I would like to have us go down and vote. There will be about 6 votes. The floor is waiting for us. We respect them also. So if we can kind of remember the timeout where we are.
I will.
So when we finish the last vote, we will come back, subject to call of the chair at that time.
After votes, what did they say? After all the votes or during the recommit?
We're still on the first. Any amendment until they file the skinny bill.
Rules Committee will come back to order, and thank you very much for coming back up after the vote. We were, as I recall, on the McGovern amendment, and we were going to seek anyone's attention to speak further on that, the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, first of all, I want to apologize to Mr. Byrne for interrupting him. But, you know, you guys are 9 and we're 4, and sometimes we feel like we get pummeled up here and are not always able to get our message across. But having said that, I'm not going to apologize for my passion on this issue. This is a big deal to me and to all of us on this side. And while the gentleman from Alabama assured me that nothing will be shoved down our throats, I have to be honest. I'm not very assured because what passed the House, in my opinion, was shoved down our throats. We didn't even wait for a CBO score. And maybe the gentleman from Alabama knew that his plan would throw 23 million people off of health care, but that was disturbing news to me, and I think that is a relevant fact that should have been known by every member of this House before we had voted on. We had a bill that had no hearings, again, no CBO score, no deliberative process, and so that is why we don't feel very assured. I'm also not assured because this committee just rejected the amendment by Mr. Hastings, which basically would have said that whatever passes the Senate has to go to conference. And, you know, if the intention is to go to conference, then I don't quite understand why that was such a difficult amendment for my Republican colleagues to accept. And so now I am simply saying that my amendment says that we need to have a CBO score on whatever we vote on in terms of health care. We ought to know how many people are going to lose their health care. We ought to know the impact that this would have on our country. We ought to do the proper analysis and our due diligence. And I don't know why why there's such reluctance to kind of have a more deliberative, thoughtful process when it comes to reforming our health care system. And I know we have different opinions on how we should approach this, but I got to tell you, it just takes my breath away when I see how this process is unfolded here first and now in the Senate. And I don't understand kind of the casual attitude that my colleagues have or what appears to be an indifference to the real harm that could occur to millions of Americans if we don't do this right. And so I would just say to my colleagues, I mean, you rejected Mr. Hastings' amendment, which I think was an appropriate amendment given our concerns. And I would hope that, that as a fallback position, you will support my amendment in saying that we're not going to vote on anything until there's a CBO score. And I urge a yes vote. I yield back my time.
Thank you very much. Gentleman yields back his time. Further discussion.
Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Georgia.
I don't disagree with my friend from Massachusetts' passion, and candidly, I don't necessarily agree with my friend from Alabama's conclusions. If the Senate passes a product that I approve of, I'm prepared to go ahead and pass it before I head home. Folks in my district have been paying a terrible price since the last time the Senate passed a reconciliation bill. The House didn't hold a single hearing on it. The House didn't make a single change to it. The House took up the Senate bill that was never intended for prime time, that was never intended to become the law of the land, and they jammed it through because they thought it was important enough to do it that way. It's the only reason we're here today. It's the only reason the American people, the American public, the American political system has been turned upside down on health care since 2010. Because we've done it that way. And so when the gentleman cautions us about the dangers of doing it that way again, I'm absolutely, I take him absolutely at his word. I have seen the danger of doing that, and it's played out over the past 6 years. No one is casual about the impact if we don't do this right. What I would say to my friend is, we didn't do this right. And there has not been one vote, not one vote that I've taken in 7 years as it relates to the Affordable Care Act that I didn't do to fix a problem that was broken. I am as disappointed as my friend is that we have not found more collaboration on addressing needs that we both know exist within our communities. But it is difficult to sit here and listen to these admonitions, as accurate as they may be, because we are only here because I was not here at that time. But when you were voting on this bill, you were not listening to those very same admonitions, and perhaps that's why you can give us this counsel with such conviction today.
Mr. Chairman, yield for
Be happy to yield, my friend.
Yeah, I would just point out to the gentleman, I disagree with his analysis, but if he thinks that the way we handle it was wrong, then I don't know why he would repeat it. But I would also point out to the gentleman, you might want to look at some of the public opinion polls. What this chamber did, supposedly to fix and help people, has about an 18% approval rating. So I would hope that maybe public opinion matters too, and I thank the gentleman for yielding.
Now, the gentleman has, as I would expect, struck directly to the core of this matter. When the gentleman took up the not ready for prime time Senate product and passed it, I'm sure he believed in his heart he was doing a great service for the American people, reforming the American healthcare system. I could not, if I studied the healthcare system for the next 100 years, figure out how to craft a system that would address the needs of my mom, my dad, my sister, my nieces, my cousin, and my aunt. I just couldn't do it because all of their needs are so different and so complex. They need to seek out their own solutions. They need to have the freedom to make their own choices. This looks so uncomfortable for the majority because we're forced, because of the rapid spiral, the death spiral that we all know is going on in the Affordable Care Act. We are forced to take on some activity to try to address the entire healthcare system in one time. But not a member in our body would have ever said, not a member on our side of the aisle would have ever said they were equipped to do that. We're not doing this because we think we're smarter than everybody else and can solve everybody's problems. We're doing this because what Congress did in 2009 and 2010 created all of these problems, and somebody has to step up to
Chairman,
solve
yield
them.
for one more time?
Be happy to.
Just curious, who's forcing you not to have hearings, or who's forcing you not to wait for a couple of weeks for a CBO report, or who's forcing you to follow a process? When we did the Affordable Care Act, there were hearings, there were amendments, there were Republican amendments that were adopted in committee. But I'm just trying to figure out who's forcing you to not open this process up to be more deliberate. I mean, maybe is it the speaker, or is it, somebody hiding here? I'm just trying to figure out who's, that's the puzzling question. I think a lot of my constituents, I think a lot of thoughtful Republicans are having that question too. They want to make sure whatever you do to fix it, any of the problems, is actually, not making things worse. And I think that is my concern. And that, anyway, we're not going to agree on the substance, but I hope that we could agree that the process here, we ought to have a little bit more information before you ask members of both parties to vote on something.
As the gentleman knows, 218 votes matters in the United States House of Representatives, and we're going to get to where we're going to go sooner or later, wherever 218 members of this body want to take us. I have been studying this issue for 7 years, as my colleagues who came in the class of 2010 have also. My friend asks what the urgency is. I confess there's less urgency today than there was when I got here in 2011, because a lot of the damage that I worried about, that I wanted to fix, it's been done. A lot of the families that had specialists that they liked and wanted to keep, those specialists have been lost. A lot of the small businesses that created a special insurance package just for their small business so that they could take care of the special needs child of one of their employees, those plans have been lost. The gentleman is absolutely right. The sense of urgency today is less because the damage has already been done. But if we can solve it for one family, if we can speed it along and provide some certainty, I think that matters. And I think my friend would agree with me that the uncertainty that Congress has created in the insurance marketplace is bad for every single one of our constituents.
Just one final thing. We don't even know what the hell we're going to be voting on. I mean, we don't even have a product. So, I mean, we can argue in general about what's coming down the road. We don't even know. And that's what makes this even more frustrating. There's not even a, we don't even know what the, we think we know what the skinny repeal, we don't really know. And again, I mean, I'm not going to convince you to support my amendment asking for a CBO score. Mr. Hastings couldn't convince you to, if anything passes, to go to conference. So it is what it is. I appreciate the gentleman for yielding, and Mr. Chairman, I will yield back to the gentleman.
And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Is there further discussion? See none, the vote now be on the McGovern amendment. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Noes have it.
Ask for a roll call.
Gentleman, ask for a roll call vote. Clerk will poll the committee.
Mr. Cole? No. Mr. Cole, no. Mr. Woodall? No. Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Burgess? No. Mr. Burgess, no. Mr. Collins? No. Mr. Collins, no. Mr. Byrne? Mr. Byrne, no. Mr. Newhouse? Mr. Buck? Nope. Mr. Buck, no. Ms. Cheney? Ms. Slaughter? Aye. Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings? Mr. Polis? Aye. Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman?
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report the total.
3 yeas, 7 nays.
Amendment's not agreed to. Not agreed to. Further amendment or discussion? Seeing none, the vote will now be on the motion from the gentleman from Oklahoma. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
The ayes have it. The ayes have it.
As for roll call?
Gentleman, asks for roll call vote.
Mr. Cole? Aye. Mr. Cole, aye. Mr. Woodall? Aye. Mr. Woodall, aye. Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess, aye. Mr. Collins? Aye. Mr. Collins, aye. Mr. Byrne? Mr. Byrne, aye. Mr. Newhouse? Mr. Buck? Yep. Mr. Buck, aye. Ms. Cheney? Ms. Slaughter? No. Ms. Slaughter, no. Mr. McGovern?
No.
Mr. McGovern, no. Mr. Hastings? Mr. Polis? No. Mr. Polis, no. Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Aye.
Mr. Chairman, aye.
Clerk will report the total.
7 yeas, 3 nays.
Motion is agreed to, and accordingly, the gentlewoman from Wyoming, Mrs. Cheney, will be handling this for Republicans.
And Mr. Hastings for Democrats.
Judge Hastings will be handling this for Democrats. Okay, please know that we have one more motion from the young chairman from Oklahoma. Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee grant S-114, the Department of Veterans Affairs Bonus Transparency Act, the closed rule. Rule provides 1 hour debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Veterans Affairs. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the amendment in the nature of a substitute printed in the Rules Committee report shall be considered as adopted, and the bill as amended shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the bill as amended. Finally, the rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instructions.
You heard the motion from the gentleman from Oklahoma. Some amendment or discussion to that? Seeing none, the vote will now be on the motion. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Ayes have it. Ayes have it. Accordingly, the gentleman, Mr. Collins, will be handling this for Republicans, and Mrs. Slaughter will be handling this for the Democrats. Would like to, if I could, remind us how invigorating it was to have two members of the British Parliament who were here, Gerald Jones and Rashban Christie. Both these members of Parliament, it is always nice when we have colleagues from other nations that are our allies to visit us, and I am delighted that they had a chance to visit the Rules Committee today. So with that said, at this point, I do not have anything to report about a further meeting this week, but trust me, if there is something that happens, we will be in touch with each other and attempt to come up with a time if we need to meet. Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
If we have an additional meeting, how much notice will we get for the meeting?
Well, you know, typically what happens is Don says, give us an hour, and it depends when we notify. but I would assume that based upon what it is, I mean, it's not going to be 2 in the morning that we would notify you. Well, I don't anticipate that. I don't anticipate that. But what I would say is that Don and Mr. Cody, I think, have a good working relationship where they listen to each other. Oh, you do not have a good they do not have a good working relationship. They do not speak.
Yeah, they do.
No, he's over here telling me.
Yeah, we like.
No, he was over. No, he was over there saying no, he doesn't like Steve Cody. Yeah, you look right at him. You're getting his blood pressure up now.
Every 5 minutes, I've got to talk to Cody.
Well, see, that's the whole point that
All here all day long.
that's I think I was saying I said I thought they got along well, but now. All right. So anyway, yeah, no. The facts of the case are we're very lucky to have both these young men. And I have great confidence, and you do too, in both these young men. Okay, here we go. All right, thank you very much. This finishes our work for the day. He was over there going,